Hello again, and welcome to another of our book reviews. Today we will be talking about Oscar Wilde, The Importance of Being Earnest. So, first things first, pardon my voice, I have a bit of a cold. Why have I chosen this book for this month's book review? Well, it was voted by some of my acquaintances on Twitter. Before that, it had been chosen as reading material by the students of our local book club. And it was only the play, like this book contains different plays, but it was only The Importance of Being Earnest, which is a pretty short play. It's something that can be read in like an afternoon. Okay, so this is one of Oscar Wilde's famous plays. What can we say about it? I think it was the last one. I think it's 1895. I would have to check. Yeah, 14th of February 1895 was the premiere at London's St James's Theatre. And probably one of his most successful plays, but it was the one that came immediately before his downfall, before the whole homosexuality affair with Bosie became public and caused Wilde's ruin and his going to prison. So it represents the zenith of his career. Uh, Wilde had started his playwriting with some historical plays. At the time in which he was writing Ernest, he had changed gears and he was writing a series of plays that I would describe as high Victorian bourgeois comedy. So, these were very light pieces, very superficial, very similar to bourgeois drama of other places. I'm thinking, for example, of Echegaray and Benavente in Spain. More decorous and more sexually and erotically restrained than maybe the French melodrama, which was very popular in Britain at the same time. But that sort of, I like to describe this as like the Shakespearean high comedy or the Jane Austen novel type of style. So merged here with the bourgeois, higher upper class bourgeois characters. So like you get this world in which the characters are all rich people, are all successful, and they don't seem to have any real things to worry, any real things to bother them at all. So, the conflict, the tension that is present in any literary work here is basically the light, erotic, romantic tension of lovers getting together in marriages, which is what happens in the high Shakespearean comedies, but also happens in, as I mentioned, in the Jane Austen novels. You get this Olympian world in which poverty, scarcity, misery, social issues, they don't exist. They have been completely banned. And I'm not saying this is a criticism of Wilde's play, but it's this sort of light-hearted, superficial, light entertainment, evasive, escapist sort of world. And that's so perfectly legitimate to do in literature. But, some contemporaries criticized Wilde pretty severely for this, notoriously George Bertrand Shaw, who was doing the complete opposite, like really socially engaged works. So as I was saying, the story represents the life of the upper English classes. The audience, from what I read in the introduction to the play, would have been pretty much that sort of public. And so plot-wise, it's just a story of two people. Well, basically one person first, John Worthing, who has adopted a fake name, Ernest, because this allows him to live a double life, not too corrupt or wicked, but like he has his serious Victorian behavior as a ward of a young lady in the countryside, and then in London with his other name, Ernest, he leads a more socially active and interesting life with different friends in the upper classes. So the story begins when he tries to marry a young woman, and the story starts to unravel because it's discovered by Algernon, his close friend, that his real name is not Ernest, but Jack or John. And this leads to a series of comedy of comedic tensions in which Algernon wants to meet this girl who is Ernest's ward, and he pretends to be Ernest. They go to the countryside. Now, everybody ends up converging in that countryside, both the two desired women, the two men protagonists, and a series of other characters. One of them, well, I'm not going to make any spoilers, but there are some other characters also in the country house that are relevant to the protagonist. And well, it's this sort of light, fluffy comedy in which the couples try and get together for marriage, and in the middle there's a lot of very witty dialogue and banter. As I said, the plot is not really that interesting. It's a pretty superficial plot. And if you had to evaluate this play in terms of the depth of the characters or the interest of the story per se, this wouldn't be a current day classic of English literature, because the characters pretty flat. They're pretty conventional, like Algernon, the friend and not exactly rival, but the mini antagonist of John is the typical upper class wastrel. His aunt, Lady Bracknell, is also a typical Victorian matriarch, and also a very easy character to make fun of, because she's a powerful woman in Victorian society who, she keeps her husband under her thumb, and she's very hypocritically Victorian in valuing conventions and the upper class, but also money. The two female protagonists, whom both Algernon and Ernest want to marry, Cecily and Gwendolen, they're just the typical smart women that you would encounter in a Shakespeare play. Miss Prism, who is the governess of Cecily, is also a bit like the typical Victorian governess, very puritanical and strict and so on. No characters from the lower classes except the butler Merriman, and he gets pretty short shrift. And as I said, the plot itself, it's a story of word plays and confusions. Probably the most interesting thing that makes the play worthwhile as literature is the language. So the subject matter is not really fascinating. The characters are not really deep. You could read the play perhaps as a satire of the upper class and also of the conventions of romance and of conventional theatre, of happy endings, of marriage, and the typical expectations and stereotypes about that. But I think the real charm of the play, besides this Olympian depiction of a life of ease and comfort and relatively small shortcomings and necessities, is this self-conscious play with language. Now, Wilde is famous for being very witty. And this play is a catalogue of witticisms, one after the other. Almost all of the conversations include very witty quips between the characters. And, it makes it a wonderful treasure trove of quotes. If you want to get good quotes, this book gives you a million of them. Not this book, this play, which is just, this is part 3. Yeah, it's this part of the book. So not that much. So this set of less than 100 pages. Yeah, it's about 50 pages, or a little bit more than 50 pages. Have a million quotes that you can use. It's funny. Theatrically speaking, I said, like, the characters are not deep and the plot is not very developed, but the actions, the staging, the entries and exits of the characters, they're well combined successfully. I think this is a play that, apart from being nice to read, I think it's probably nice to watch. And proof of that are some of the many adaptations that it has had, not only on the stage, but on the cinema. There are at least 2 or 3 film versions that I can think of. So, as I was saying, the beauty of this play is its witticism, its use of language, and it feels sometimes a little bit excessive in that it detracts to the realism of the situation and of the dialogue. But then again, as I said, this is a puff piece. I'd like to compare it to, I don't know, it's a piece of cotton candy, or a souffle. It's this sort of witty, funny, entertaining, delightful, Olympic world of fun and wit and complete superficiality that probably Wilde would have been delighted to see his play described as. It's just this funny aestheticist comedic piece. It's trivial, like he has a sentence which I'm not going to find, a motto or a summary for this play in which he says something like, I don't remember, is it a witty play or a superficial play for serious people or something of the sort? He has like this quip for describing the importance of being earnest, but I can't find it right now, which is a pity. But I think that spirit is the spirit of the play. So it's an entertaining, light piece. It's very enjoyable. You could try to read social criticism on it and other aspects, but I think the way of reading this play is putting the focus on humor and wit and farce, its farcical, slightly farcical character, and its high comedic nature. It's basically farcical comedy, and if you wish, yeah, it makes fun of burdensome Victorian social obligations. And yeah, I think that's it. Would I recommend it? I recommend all of Wilde's plays. My personal favorite in this book is Salome, which is the last one, which is completely different. Like Salome is the typical fin de siècle modernist, decadentist, highly erotic play. The others are bourgeois pieces. And, I read this book a long time ago. I bought this book in Ireland in 1997, and then I donated it to the school library. And I hadn't read the plays since then. Maybe I did reread Salome. One interesting thing was that out of the 5 plays of this book, I only remember the plot of Salome, obviously, and of Ernest, like An Ideal Husband, A Woman of No Importance, Lady Windermere's Fan. I know they're generally similar to The Importance of Being Earnest, but I do remember Ernest's plot, and I don't remember these other plays' plot. So, if you want to read Wilde at his lightest, at his more sugary and witty and funny and superficial and entertaining, there are a few better places you could try and a few better pages you could browse than the pages of The Importance of Being Earnest.